I'm Melanie Carter, 34, standing under white lights in a rented downtown showroom with a mic warm in my hand and cameras blinking red. Dad stands 10 feet away, confused, and Lucas, my brother, is flushed and whispering to himself near the demo racks. Dana Brooks, my counsel, glides a stack of terminations into place with that slow, sure motion lawyers have. Thomas Hale, the CFO, waits for my cue, his tablet open and calm. I say, deactivate both badges, and security walks toward Dad and Lucas while Jordan Wells, the bank liaison, watches without blinking. The board members raise their hands and the vote tally fills the screen. I read the new cap table out loud. Dad mouths, "How?" and I answer into the mic, "You'll hear it in a moment. For now, I own this." Before I tell you how I turned their insult into a takeover that stripped their titles in public, tell me where you're listening from. Drop your city in the comments. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more family revenge stories. I read every note. Then I'll show you how I made the bank, the board, and the badges answer to me. I schedule crews across 3 states and I treat the calendar like a conductor treats a score. On any given day, I have 120 field technicians in motion and 35 support staff answering the lines, and there is a wall of open tickets that tells me where storms might form. Every finished install has a mesh Wi-Fi heat map, Lutron dimming profiles tuned to the room, control 4 scenes that know when to lower shades and start music, thermostats zoned by load so systems don't fight each other, and an underwriter's laboratory's monitored alarm path that ties to a central station. My tech concierge plan is not a slogan, it is a promise. A 24/7 helpline, remote remediation targeted to happen within 6 minutes, and a next-day on-site guarantee when the remote fix is not enough. The fleet is 48 service vans, geo-fenced to job clusters and stocked with doorbells, cameras, electric vehicle chargers, leak sensors, and battery-backed gateways. Our network operations center stabilizes over 30,000 devices, access points, bridges, locks, thermostats, and uptime is tracked to 0.1% on a screen I can read at a glance. My spreadsheets are surgical. They do not bother with color beyond what matters. Crew utilization, first-time fix rate, recurring monthly revenue per door, churn by builder, and parts truck pick lists by zip. I build checklists for every install so the next tech sees what I would have asked for. I set service-level agreement timers that beep on the wall at support so nobody ever forgets the clock. I did this work because it was necessary and because it was steady day after day, and because an operation that runs like a machine is the only thing clients notice when everything is going right. What I built they took for granted the way people take daylight for granted, until it goes out and they remember the lamp. I negotiated builder packages I called bronze, silver, and gold that held margins even when copper spiked and shipments slipped for weeks. When a power company outage or a rainstorm knocked a neighborhood offline, we fixed the Wi-Fi first and then sold the customer an electric vehicle charger with battery storage as a resale value play and resilience for the house. I rewrote our service script so an older client hears dignity instead of surveillance. We framed gentler in-home sensors as tools that preserve independence, not as ways to monitor. Vendor days were diplomacy in practice. I scheduled a Lutron rep for 10 in the morning, the underwriter's laboratory's alarm partner at 1, and kept the integrator's chat buzzing between site visits. I added 2 states by negotiating warehouse leases by square footage and power requirements rather than prestige or view. Trucks decide your radius, I respect that. On demo days and quarterly meetings, I present impact, not theater. I measure builder churn, average revenue per install, warranty call counts, and recurring monthly revenue growth. Applause lands on Dad and Lucas because applause is performative and their names are larger in the room. My name is often a footnote, even when contracts reference the systems I designed, the processes I wrote, and the teams I hired. They clap for the founder as if the systems were a talisman handed down and not a tension of work and spreadsheets. The Carter family rules are a soft gravity they do not require ceremony to hold. Dad's word is gravity, his nod rearranges the room, and his displeasure makes people slow down like a car entering mud. Resistance against that gravity does not bounce, it breaks. Lucas walks in late, jokes with project managers, and reads off slide titles I wrote as if he had authored them. Mom calls me after meetings to calm down when I am not upset. Her request translates to accept the slight and do not make a scene. At dinner, I am asked about my little operations, while Lucas is asked about strategy and vision in a tone that suggests the terms are naturally masculine. When I pushed a woman technician into a senior lead role, Dad dismissed it as optics. When Lucas promoted a man with lower numbers, Dad praised his instinct. This is the central lack I navigated. Results without recognition, duty without dignity. I was necessary, so necessary that the company would have collapsed without the work I oversaw, but I was not named. I learned to become invisible in plain sight. My victories were filed under someone else's mantle. The rules of the family were as clear as contracts but unstated. Take what you can, give priority to the male heir, and keep the family story tidy. Every time I pushed past those rules, the walls tightened. That taught me another rule: when a system erodes your worth publicly, you can either live smaller or redesign the system. I memorized dashboards the way other people memorize phone numbers. I wrote the key performance indicators that feed lenders and used them to know how the credit people slept. The lender looks at churn rate by builder cohort, network operations center uptime, recurring monthly revenue growth, fleet incident metrics, and the ratio of parts cost to ticket volume. The credit line covenant summary is merciless in its simplicity. The bank can freeze a line if builder churn exceeds 8% in a trailing 60-day window, or if network operations center uptime drops below 99.9% for any rolling month. Vendor terms matter. Payment terms of 30 days on cameras, payment terms of 45 days on gateways, and 2 major distributors whose rebates hinge on quarterly volume thresholds. Our underwriters' laboratories contract renewal sits in the third quarter with service audits in the 6 weeks before renewal. Failures there can trigger temporary suspensions. Our top 10 builders account for 42% of revenue, lose 4%, and the service desk buckles under legacy calls and warranty claims. I know the names of the bank analysts who read our dashboards weekly, how they interpret a rising incident rate as noise and a dropping uptime percentage as signal. I know which metrics trip automatic reviews and which require a human to say the word concern. I learned the language of covenants until it became a second skin. That knowledge is not flashy, it is precise, a tool like any other. It lets me see where leverage will appear if everything else performs as it should. I was scheduled to speak on operations. That was the part of the day I had always owned. Then, morning of the summit, my slot evaporated like fog under a lamp. I watched the calendar update and told myself to breathe. The more obvious the slight, the clearer the line of response should become. A junior project manager avoided my eye and then, later, apologetically offered to help with a demonstration I'd prepared. Mom called that night and asked if I was angry enough to make a scene. Her plea felt like a hand on my shoulder trying to steady me into compliance. I packed my demo notes anyway. Little things that seem petty in isolation add up. A new line in the pre-summit budget mentioned senior management branding, and the trophy wall had recently been polished to a shine in places that made Lucas's name jump at the right angle. I noticed the fleet keys being rearranged and filed a mental picture, timestamp, placard, who was sitting where. My inbox filled with polite calendar invites that smelled faintly of ownership claims. When a vendor refused to meet eye to me during a tour, I took that too as data. My gut tightened into a band of cold focus. Disturbances are signals if you read them like instruments, not insults yet, but the weather changing. I started listing windows, contract renewals, audit dates, the underwriter's laboratories renewal in a notebook I carried like a talisman. The notebook was nothing fancy. It had coffee rings and a dog-eared corner where a ticket had been torn out. On the first page, I wrote the word window in block letters and circled the date. I did this without fanfare. It was a practice of framing: notice, measure, plan. I did not tell anyone what I was thinking because telling is the same as giving them the shape of your intent. Instead, I worked in silence. I archived emails, backed up scripts, and quietly exported contract schedules into a spreadsheet that lived on an encrypted drive. I memorized which builders liked white glove hand-holding and which ones would always push delivery dates to the limit. I started short calls with the NOC at 3 a.m. to see who answered and how quickly. Ava Bennett, who would later be my operations lead, stopped by one night to drop off a box of parts and said, "Everything okay?" I lied and said yes. The lie was small and useful. It preserved her calm and kept my plans from becoming gossip. The day of the summit arrived with that thin, high light a showroom uses to make everything look cleaner than it is. The demonstration floor hummed like a well-tuned refrigerator, a steady mechanical white noise under the chatter. Our Control 4 theater looped a trailer in the corner. Dimmers choreographed the room in slow washes of warm light. Lenders in blazers stood to one side, vendors in name tags to the other, builders with clipboards by their logos, and city partners who'd RSVP'd out of obligation watched with polite curiosity. Technicians in polos lined up near the gear racks like a quiet force. Everything smelled of coffee, new paint, and the faint tang of ozone where demo racks hummed. My chair was 2 rows back, aisle seat, a place I had chosen when moderating panels because it let me see who came in and who lingered. I could see the fleet keys on the wall like a map of places I had opened. The mic squealed when Dad tapped it, that small electrical fizz that sets teeth on edge. He smiled at donors, at the plaques I had argued should be mounted where they wouldn't catch the light wrong. Lucas was near the mic, rehearsing a joke with a vendor who owed us a rebate check. The pre-summit slide that had once announced titles glared at me from the screen across the room. Leadership announcement, in large, unmistakable letters. Then Dad spoke in the clear public way only people who have always been obeyed can. He said, into the microphone that carried across the glass and the snack table with its neat rows of croissants, "You're too stupid to run the technology firm." The words dropped like a hiss of air from a punctured tire. Lucas leaned into the mic like a man landing a corollary blow. "Men are better leaders," he said, and he winked at a builder who had a daughter. The room registered it. Some laughed a reflex laugh, some held silence tight like a fist, others fumbled their drinks. My full name was on a placard in the front row from when I used to moderate panels, visible, unused. I kept my face still. My phone was in my palm, but my hand didn't move. Instead, I emailed myself a photo of the keys board and the slide for later documentation, a small, surgical act of evidence gathering. The immediate consequences were practiced and subtle. Conversation reformatted around Lucas. People who had once asked me technical questions now sidestepped as if my role had shrunk. A technician in the back mouths, "Thank you," as if my work were already a thing to be admired from afar, not a living part of the company. I walked past a framed certification I had fought to earn and felt the edges of ownership like cold metal. The showroom smelled the same: coffee, ozone, polish, but the air had a new flavor: assumption. My badge still opened doors. My inbox still had the keys to vendor portals. I didn't cry. I did inventory. I paced the room in the way people habitually do when lists press against the ribs. Assets, liabilities, contract renewals, the vendor with the most leverage, the ones who'd break first if cash got tight. I thought of our NOC uptime and our builder concentration, of which builders had terms that allowed for porting and which ones would fight in litigation. The decision wasn't to flee, it was to fight on terms I would choose. Walking out was anticlimactic because I had already rehearsed the movement. I put my demo notes in a neat pile, folded the printed scripts, and left my key fobs on my desk in a line like a gesture. The action felt ceremonial but quiet, like laying tools down while you decide whether you'll use them again. I texted Ava Bennett, my mentee, "I'll be in touch when it's safe," and her reply was a single check mark. My suitcase later had 2 suits, a pair of steel toes, and a hard drive full of templates and contracts I had written. I disabled vendor accounts I controlled before they could be changed. I didn't take anything proprietary because you can't take systems in a suitcase, only knowledge and the will to reassemble them. Mom called that night. I let it ring twice and then sent a short message. "I'll call when it's settled." If she had said, "Be gracious," it might have welded my resolve too neatly back into their orbit. Instead, I put my hand on the hotel room lamp and looked at a city I had never planned to live in. The cold of the night air outside felt like a clean line drawn across a map. I stopped being theirs, and for the first time in a long while, the choice felt right. Leela Chen ran a tiny network operations center on a shelf of monitors that looked like they were punched together by people who liked late nights. She gave me a tour and pointed to wires and scripts like they were recipes. "We have big brains, small monitors," she said, and we laughed because it was true. Ava Bennett showed up with a box of used parts and a list of techs who would take a risk for a clear promise. Northline had debt, messy books, and a reputation for trying hard. It had, crucially, clients who wanted stability and were tired of excuses. We laid out the services to match the market and my experience. Mesh Wi-Fi, locks, cameras, zoned HVAC, lighting control, leak shutoff, underwriters' laboratories alarm monitoring through a partner, electric vehicle chargers bundled with battery storage, solar options, small theaters for home buyers who wanted them, and aging-in-place sensors pitched as dignity, not surveillance. I set immediate targets that could be measured in an afternoon and proven in a day. Tech concierge response times under 6 minutes, zero downtime Wi-Fi remaps during migrations, and builder conversions with white glove porting. The urgency was simple: flip cash in 60 days or close the doors. I treated the clock like a metronome, marking cadence for all of us. No theatrics, only work. We rolled up sleeves and started building a machine out of a smaller engine, and for the first time since the showroom, the work felt like something I owned from the ground up. My first week at Northline was pure triage. I opened every recurring revenue line and labeled it truth, fiction, and somewhere in between. The helpline was a single shared cell phone that pinged every 5 minutes. I put in a cloud phone system, set ring groups by skill, and made sure a real person answered within the first ring. I changed our language from tickets to incidents because a ticket can sit, an incident demands a clock. I mapped the vans and found they carried the wrong parts for the jobs we sold most often. I wrote 3 truck stock profiles that matched job types and removed dead weight from every inventory list. The website promised everything. We pared it down to what we could deliver reliably and beautifully. Cash burn was a yardstick I learned to watch like a radar: 8 weeks to runway 0 if we didn't flip the curve. Comms changed: daily stand-ups, visible SLAs on the office wall, and a dashboard in the break room that showed the current response time in live digits. People noticed the numbers moving before they noticed the emails. I prioritized payroll and built an emergency kit for weekend installs: pre-packed gateways, surge units, cellular failover modules to buy us breathing room when the unexpected hit. Triage meant tough calls. Which unpaid invoices we chased and which ones we let slide to preserve relationships. It meant rewriting promises into contracts that matched our capacity. It was dirty, necessary work that smelled like toner and fast food because nobody had time for anything else. Wins came faster than we had a right to expect, and each one had a cost clipped to its tail. Response times fell to 5 minutes and 40 seconds on a good day, and we posted time-stamped screenshots to social feeds and to builder contacts. Leela built alert rules that auto-remediate access point flaps before clients noticed. We used that to craft a line: "We fixed it while you slept." We pushed for advanced certifications on weekends, study groups, and coffee in the office so we could unlock vendor discounts and better margins. I rewrote the service contract to include dignity-first language for aging clients and added a first trust visit to every concierge plan so people could meet a technician in person. A large builder signed 20 model homes after we guaranteed a zero downtime network cutover during their open house schedule. We met it, and it felt like sleeping in shifts in vans until the job was done. The cost showed up in two ways: exhaustion and attrition. Two technicians left under the pressure, and one distributor refused flexible terms on shipments. Our margins tightened when shipments were late, and stress made mistakes more likely. Yet each win sharpened our credibility, and that credibility started to feel like currency in its own right. Markets are not sympathetic to anyone's story, and we felt that quickly. A rebate we had counted on arrived late, and suddenly payroll felt like a negotiation rather than a given. A big client withheld payment over a scratched faceplate on a camera. I drove there, replaced it, and left with a check because cash was the thing that kept the truck lights on. Our prospective underwriter's laboratories partner told us exclusivity was possible if we hit higher monitoring thresholds, which sounded like a lifeline and like a new weight at once. A shipment of cameras disappeared in transit. We redirected installs to alternative brands and ate the margin to keep appointments. Ethan would text me at 2 in the morning to say he was worried I was burning bridges too fast. I told him hard is the only setting left. One mid-sized builder panicked at the idea of change and reversed a signed letter of agreement. We returned his deposit to protect our reputation and took the hit. A neighborhood manager, someone I used to know socially, sent a curt email with hints of legal teeth. Dana drafted a reply that was calm and full of citation, the kind of response that shuts down bluff. A distributor tightened terms under market pressure. We began paying cash on delivery to preserve supply and prove reliability to clients. A small bank turned us down for a line, citing concentration in the industry. I filed the name in my memory. Every push forward required money and a willingness to accept short pain for long gain. We adjusted like operators who knew how to pivot without shame. We added electric vehicle charger bundles with battery storage, packaged as both resale value and resilience. Neighbors liked the idea of a backup for storms and resale value for buyers. We paired leak detection with auto shutoffs and marketed it as avoid the deductible, which translated fear into practical math builders could sell. For a breath, we stopped chasing luxury theaters and focused on what delivered recurring revenue and quick installs. Wi-Fi, locks, and thermostats. I created a concierge tier with guaranteed on-site windows that we could staff, not promise, and that honesty won us trust. We struck a partnership with a home health agency and reframed aging-in-place sensors as tools of independence. Sign-ups doubled because families were tired of scary alternatives. I rewrote job postings and offered experienced technicians a recruiting pitch that wasn't about free lunch but about respect and a stake in governance. 3 came from companies where they were numbers. Sweat equity terms were negotiated that week. 35% equity vesting on tight milestones, service level agreement under 6 minutes, recurring monthly revenue up 25%, 2 builder conversions, and underwriters' laboratories exclusivity. Ethan took a board seat and I wrote governance clauses that prevented dilutive backroom moves. The plan reset the clock, 12 weeks of runway now if we hit milestones. The documents included a protective line I knew I'd need later, a right of first refusal on certain distressed debt. We left a small option pool for leaders like Leela and Ava who were taking real risk. I slept 3 hours the first night after signing and felt like the pulse in the company changed, from surviving to moving toward a strategy that could force other people's hands. The pivot wasn't graceful. It was honest, surgical, and it made the rest of what I had in mind possible. I insisted on a protective provision, no sale without my consent for 2 years, and a clause that required an independent valuation for any transaction that might move our control. We left a blank line for one more clause I had not yet filled, my right of first refusal on certain distressed debt related to competitors and infrastructure vendors. It was a quiet line, a hinge I might swing later, and writing it in felt like placing a seed in winter. Dana prepared the documents with the neat brutality of a surgeon, no poetic phrases, only binding language. We also agreed to performance milestones with clear measurement periods and a waterfall for equity vesting so nobody could accuse us of sloppiness. Ethan put his initials on the board seat and I felt the shift in the room, a small, mechanical rearrangement of power. We signed in ink because ink does not evaporate with a change of mood. We scanned the signed pages into secure storage and printed copies for the physical binders on my desk. The paper smelled faintly of the office toner and coffee, but the signatures were warmer than the toner, an affirmation that we were no longer improvising. I felt both relief and the old cold knot that told me urgency had not faded. It had sharpened into a tool. Mapping neighborhoods' top 10 builders felt like drawing a battlefield map, except the battleground was lawns and showrooms and model homes with staged kitchens. I flagged those with frequent service complaints, those with contracts ending in the next 90 days, and those whose general contractors tolerated only minimal downtime during open houses. I designed conversion kits like a chef builds mise en place, everything needed for the job, pre-labeled, pre-scripted, and ready to deploy at dawn on cutover weekends. Kits included thermostat zone files, control scenes, camera stream settings, lock code migration scripts, and step-by-step instructions for on-site techs. We tested every porting script on a bench until the logs looked tidy. We photographed the process for builders' marketing so they would see minimal disruption and maximum attention. My sales deck became a logistics plan. "We keep your model homes live during show hours," the headline read. I walked builders through case studies showing previous zero downtime cutovers with on-site tech photos and client testimonials. We offered service credits, carefully modeled to be break-even over time but valuable as a safety net for builders who feared downtime. The pitch was simple and honest. We move your systems without your buyers losing a moment of experience. Ava's name sat in a referral letter template I started to send. Ava Bennett will be your local liaison, even though she didn't know yet that I intended to make her future part of the plan. I wanted to position her as both a competent operator and as someone whose career we were about to accelerate. The first 60 days were about momentum. We moved 2 builders cleanly and the churn needle on Neighborhood's dashboard began to twitch. Every tactic I designed was built with a legal and ethical filter. I briefed Dana Brooks on every conversion step and we built compliance checklists before we wrote any outreach email. We used only public information, client consents, and our own capabilities. No non-public data left its home. Dana read every script until the phrases became clinical to her, and then she rewrote the ones that might cause a regulator to raise an eyebrow. We trained our techs on brand-neutral talk tracks, how to say "we're here to make sure your model home works for open house" instead of "we'll beat your current provider," because the market hates pettiness and lawyers love precision. After each conversion, we filed paper trails, signed consents, time-stamped cutover logs, and pre- and post images. The checklist included a client sign-off, an internal audit, and a compliance review. If someone wanted to read our files, they would find blue ink signatures, signed consents, and a tidy set of notes. We refused to poach anyone under signed non-competes. Instead, we hired those who came voluntarily and cleared each hire with counsel. Our rule was clear: outperform, do not undercut unlawfully. If competition was on a field of skill and service, we would win on skill and service. If it came to undermining or misappropriating, we would not stoop. The revenge I wanted was legal and permanent, not messy and litigated. I told the techs this plainly: we will never ask you to break an agreement. But we will offer you a place where your work is valued. It had moral clarity. It also kept Dana from making me rewrite apologies. Cost rose like tidewater. A mid-sized builder I had counted on panicked when their sales director called with questions about changing providers. They reversed their signed letter of agreement and demanded their deposit back, citing internal politics and a change in direction. We returned the deposit and took the hit to keep our reputation clean. It was the sort of loss that looks petty on a spreadsheet but corrosive in trust. A manager at Neighborhood sent a curt email with implied legal threats. Dana's reply was precise. Citations, contract references, and an offer to meet with a neutral mediator. The tone shut down bluff without escalating. Supply chains tightened their grip. A distributor, spooked by volume shifts in the market, tightened payment terms and required cash on delivery for 2 weeks. We paid cash where needed, moved margin to preserve supply, and documented every step to show partners we were acting in good faith. A small bank declined a short line citing industry concentration risk and handed me a name I filed mentally. It was the same banker who had smiled at Dad at a charity event. Connections like that have a currency all their own. Meanwhile, a technician received a message from Lucas offering a higher wage and an implausible bonus to return. He texted me the offer, hands shaking, and I saw the moment where money could fracture loyalty. I called him and offered transparency, retention bonuses, clear schedules, and a role in training junior staff. He stayed because we kept promises. It was both gratifying and expensive. Every setback forced a recalibration. I logged losses not as personal failures but as paid lessons about where vulnerabilities still existed: supply, capital, and human fragility. I made decisions with a drummer's rhythm, small, steady beats, then a louder downstroke to move the tempo. The plan remained the same: grow our base, prove our operational superiority, and prepare the timing that would make other people's covenants matter in a way they could not ignore. Ethan texts short, clipped worries about whether I am sleeping enough. He offers to take more meetings. I hand him a prioritized task list and ask for delegation, not sentiment. The weight of responsibility sits in my chest like a stone I carry so I can claim it when necessary. I write myself letters that begin with the insult, those 2 sentences from the summit, then list the plan beneath. I do not send them. I stack them in a folder called Records. The act of writing is a ritual that makes the plan feel less imagined and more inevitable. Friends offer to meet for dinner and I decline more than I accept. I am not trying to be cold. I am trying to make space to think in lines and numbers. There are small betrayals that hurt more than the big ones. A cousin posts a vague social media note about family drama and invites commentary. I block and archive and move on with surgical speed. Lucas starts circulating an email to old coworkers with a mix of facts and venom. HR at Neighborhood intercepts and offers exit interviews. Dad leaves a voicemail that is roughly half pride and half reproach. I listen once and then set it aside. My rule becomes simple: no family negotiations during business hours. I will deal with personal matters on Sundays when the numbers can breathe. Even then, I am careful. I don't parse Dad's mixed emotions while I am executing a turnaround. The business needs crisp decisions and clean processes. Sentiment complicates process. Physically, the work takes me to places I had not been in years: warehouses at dawn, midnight cutovers, vendor floors where crates smell of timber and packing oil. I sleep on couches sometimes and wake to alarms that pull me out of a dream about code deployment. My throat gets sore from long calls, my hands get dry from signing documents and flipping pages. I have not had a proper weekend in months. The strain is real, but so is the clarity. The personal cost is not incidental, it is counted. I know what I have given up: dinner conversations that are easy, a mother who once smoothed things over, a brother who used to be a companion because I traded them for control. The trade feels bitter and precise. The narrowing comes with a clarity I have learned to rely on. When options are many, decisions dilute. When options are few, you see the clean line of what must be done. I sketch the debt tree and it looks like a plant with roots you can trace. The bank's credit line sits senior, equipment leases sit scattered, vendor receivables hang like fruit, and a few funds hold distressed tranches that turn over frequently. I call a distressed debt broker and ask for pointers about who holds paper in our space. Names come back: fund managers with redemption pressures, lenders who resell within windows. I form Carter Resolve LLC quietly, a small company with a clear sole purpose: acquire target debt and create leverage to force a restructuring if covenants trip. Dana draws a clean legal firewall between Northline and Carter Resolve, no commingling of funds, no shared resources, separate records, separate bank accounts. The firewall is intentionally rigid because softness is a leak. We negotiate through a special purpose vehicle manager on the bids so my voice is not obvious to market chatter. The strategy is simple on paper. Make covenant triggers meaningful on a timetable I control by outperforming operationally and by holding the instruments that can force a vote. I circle neighborhoods underwriters' laboratories renewal month and write window on the calendar in block letters large enough that even a cursory glance will find it. The thesis is precise: performance plus paper. If we move enough builders within a narrow window and if the network operations center uptime dips on a rolling month by even a fraction, the bank's covenant can freeze their line. If Carter Resolve controls senior tranches sufficient to propose a restructuring, we can present a debt for equity swap that looks like the only viable path forward. It is not elegant, it is lawful leverage. The plan requires us to hold our nerve, to perform operationally without error, and to be patient enough to let legal and contractual mechanisms do the work prosecutors and journalists might try to do in vain. The arithmetic is cold and delicious. It makes the personal cost feel like fuel. I bid quietly on slices of neighborhood senior debt through a distressed fund that had to move paper quickly. We did not show aggression, we priced to move. Speed mattered more than margin because being first and clean meant we would own the agenda. I negotiated step-in rights, notification triggers, and options that would allow us to control pain points like fleet leases and vendor receivables should covenants trip. I did not want headlines that said daughter buys dad's debt because that reads bad and invites messy questions. So Dana set up a special purpose vehicle manager to conduct the bids and shuffle ownership through intermediaries. Jordan Wells appeared on diligence calls. I did not reveal my voice. Dana led the calls under the special purpose vehicle manager's authority, and I listened in through coded lines. We bought enough to be meaningful, not enough to be glutted. The purchases gave us a lever. If the bank froze the credit line under the covenant triggers, Carter Resolve would sit in a position to present restructuring terms that favored a debt for equity swap. The idea felt dangerous in the best way, like holding a fuse that could be lit if everything aligned. I also secured options on portions of fleet leases and certain vendor receivables. These options are small, contractual controls that matter when a company has to choose what to pay. Paper is not romance, it is leverage. I felt the gravity of that reality settle in my chest when the signed transfers hit our secure folders. The quiet click of the scanner felt like a shot heard nowhere. Timing is everything. We set marketing and conversion calendars to align with the underwriter's laboratory's renewal and the bank's review windows. We scheduled conversion offers to neighborhood's top builders inside a 60-day burst. Northline's network operations center uptime was solid. Leela's team had kept it clean, but we published live dashboards so the market could watch and compare. We offered monitoring credits to clients who migrated underwriters' laboratories' accounts after renewal, which meant recurring monthly revenue timing could be nudged in our favor. We invested in white-glove crews for cut-over weekends and prepositioned parts so there were no excuses. The math was plain. If 4 top builders moved in the window, the churn would exceed 8% and trip a covenant. If incident rates stacked in the same month to bring uptime below 99.9%, we had a second, independent tripwire. Both together would create a bank review and the right for holders of senior debt to force a restructuring proposal. The plan was not a trap of malice. It was a lever built on documented performance and careful choreography. It required absolute discipline, no skirting of laws, no data theft, only superior service, and the patience to let clauses in covenants translate service disruptions into enforceable financial leverage. The fuse was set. I had placed the match within reach. Ava Bennett was the one I trusted to be cool in the eye of chaos. I told her only what she had to know. If the call came, she would step up as interim chief executive officer and run operations. I coached her on the opening words, calm, clear, short, and we practiced a slow, patient walk through the documents she might be handed. Ethan Price kept the day-to-day breathing and the investors calm. His presence in the boardroom meant fewer questions about continuity. Sam Porter, our Underwriters Laboratories partner representative, prepared a dated letter that confirmed transfer terms effective the day we needed them to be effective. Jordan Wells, the bank liaison, knew to expect an immediate notice and had agreed to send a confirmation receipt within the hour of our filing. We met in person to rehearse timing. Who spoke, when the cap table would appear on screen, when the badge deactivation commands would be sent. Every action had a timestamp. We built redundancy into redundancy. Dana had a wired copy in a legal folder, Thomas had an emailed version to the bank, and I kept a paper bundle that traveled in a locked briefcase. I refused to let secrecy be sloppy. Everything went through a chain of custody. Documents were signed in ink and scanned to secure storage the moment a signature dried. We used a security vendor to stage badge deactivations at prearranged times and to map escort paths for anyone who would be asked to surrender hardware. I arranged for a neutral third party to record the meeting and to distribute the file within the hour. We budgeted for retention bonuses, legal reserves, and a one-time communications team to answer the phones. There would be no improvisation on the day of the event. Improvisation invites error. The playbook was detailed and narrow, follow it exactly. In doing this, I burned bridges intentionally. I declined Mom's invitations to soften the strategy with conversation. I knew a dinner would nearly always put a hand on my shoulder and talk me out of a clean line. An old mentor suggested I make peace and accept a comfortable executive vice president title that would preserve relationships but not the control I intended to hold. I told him I decided my titles now and cut the call. Ethan asked whether I could tilt between righteous and ruthless. I told him we would be lawful and precise, and that answer sat between us like a weight. We cut a vendor who had skeptical loyalties. The relationship ended without ceremony. It felt ugly for a moment, though possibly uglier in memory than in reality. Disloyalty is a sickness you do not politely nurse. I accepted that some technicians, old friends, and even a few executives would resent what I was about to do. I set aside a budget for retention bonuses because loyalty could be bought fairly and compassionately. I meant to keep people who mattered. I declined to play the part of the person who would make it up to Dad in private. Any private reconciliation that compromised the company was not on offer. I told myself that history would judge the act differently than the moment. For now, I was prepared to be disliked by people I had loved. We sent invitations that read neutral but precise. Partnership announcement. The list was exhaustive: employees, members of the board, the bank, vendors, major clients, and local press. Invitations were emailed and hand-delivered to executive suites to ensure no one could claim they did not receive notice. Attendance was mandatory for executives, strongly suggested for board members, and encouraged for major builders. The agenda was attached, and it left little to the imagination: attendance and voting rights. Identification and reading of covenant definitions from the loan agreement, the presentation of relevant financial holdings and voting packets, a proposed debt for equity swap, executive terminations for cause, non-compete notices, and the reconstitution of the board. The language was austere and intentionally mechanical, so the appearance would be of a lawful, properly documented meeting, not a spectacle. I arranged the audiovisual plan like a stage manager: live cap table on screen, individual vote tally at the podium, a mic cue for speakers, and a recorder that already had an upload path to bank and vendor counsel. Security details we contracted were given a minute-by-minute plan: badge deactivation schedule, laptop collection protocol, and escort paths mapped so everyone would know where to go before their access changed. The script included a required on-mic correction to the record by Dad and Lucas, an on-record statement retracting succession day remarks and acknowledging operational realities to be part of the official minutes. I made the retraction a condition of closure because words spoken publicly had been the instrument of my humiliation. Now words would be part of the remedy. I signed the final go order at midnight the night before the meeting. The signature was small, my initials on the last page, but it felt enormous in my chest. There is a particular quiet that comes right before an irreversible move. The phones go dark, email slows, and you realize this is a hinge point. I slept a little, woke with a tight jaw, and reviewed the deck one last time. The plan once sent could not be recalled without revealing my hand. That reality felt like stepping onto a bridge you cannot go back from. It was both terrifying and clarifying. On the day, the room was a precise reversal of memory. I arranged it to echo the showroom where Dad had humiliated me, the same aisle lines, the same left and right placement of lenders and vendors, the same press line along the side wall. It mattered because the space had been a wound. Now the wound would be the stage for repair. I started the meeting on time, eyes dry and voice steady. I was chairing. Dana introduced Jordan Wells as the bank observer, Thomas Hale as our chief financial officer to present the facts, and Sam Porter as our underwriters laboratories partner to confirm any transfer letters. My opening line was mechanical. We will proceed according to the documents. Feelings are acknowledged but not binding here, which set the tone that process, not sentiment, would govern the room. Slide 1 showed attendance and voting rights with names and proxy assignments. Slide 2 laid out the agenda and the process for motions. Slide 3 was the covenant definitions pulled from the loan agreement, exact wording, highlighted terms, and citations to the relevant pages. I watched faces as each phrase appeared. Some looked away, others sat forward. Then I cued Thomas. His voice was steady as he read the trailing performance numbers, churn, uptime, and the bank notice provisions. The room listened like a court. There was no chance to interrupt the words without appearing to interrupt a documented, neutral reading. Timing was part of the power. I felt the weight of the moment. This was not revenge in the melodramatic sense. It was execution of a plan that converted operational success and legal architecture into control. When the numbers were on the screen, they were indifferent. Facts do not plead, they simply exist and demand responses. The play I had assembled relied on that indifference. It respected it. The first strike was not loud. It was clean, practiced, and anchored in documents that a judge, a banker, or a vendor could read and understand without the theater of family drama. If the room felt small, it was because everything that happened had to fit inside the frame we had drawn, and nothing that happened could shatter the frame without consequences we had prepared for. I breathed once, felt the tightness go, and moved to the next slide. Sam Porter had provided a dated letter from the underwriters laboratories partner confirming that exclusivity transfer language could be executed in our favor on the effective date we'd targeted. Thomas read the RMR impact in dollars and monthly revenue lost, but he read it slowly so the room could feel the arithmetic. Recurring monthly revenue down, margin compressed in quarters ahead, a bank covenant that made the credit line subject to review. Jordan Wells, the bank liaison, sat with his tablet and did not need to speak for the effect to be registered. His presence alone was its own punctuation. When Thomas cited the exact clause, page, and paragraph, the words settled in the room. If builder churn exceeds 8% for a trailing 60 days, the lender may freeze the line. He read the clause that set the 99.9% uptime threshold. He read the bank's remedy paragraph that allowed holders of senior debt to require a restructuring proposal when the line was impacted. Then Thomas made the pivot everyone in the room had been bracing for. He displayed the cap table and the debt holdings. Carter Resolve LLC was listed as holding sufficient tranches of senior debt to influence restructuring terms. There it was on the screen, entries of debt purchased, the dates, and the precise percentage of senior holdings. The display was designed to remove ambiguity. No one could look away from the spreadsheet and still claim ignorance. Thomas closed his tablet, and for a beat the only sound was the slight hum of the HVAC. Facts do not plead or apologize. They are simply evidence that a system once dependent on assumptions now faced contractual mechanics it could not ignore. I gave the simple direction that had been rehearsed. Under the terms, we will proceed to a vote on the proposed debt for equity swap as outlined. Those in favor, please raise your hand. The voting cards were distributed, proxy assignments were recorded, and the board members lifted their hands. Camera phones hovered like distant birds. The tally appeared on the screen in real time. The motion passed with the thresholds we needed, 76% voting control to me. A clerk in the corner printed the consent form. Dana and I signed in ink. The time-stamped emails that would go to counsel and the bank were queued to send. I read the executive terminations slowly, each word chosen to tie the cause to documented failures and covenant consequences, so there would be no frivolous claim of personal grievance overriding lawful reason. Terminations for cause are effective immediately, I read. The language was clinical. Citations to the covenant breaches, references to articles in the bylaws about fiduciary responsibility, and the precise language for severance and non-compete corridors. Security, as rehearsed, moved on my cue. I watched the room as the badges blinked and then went dark. The sound of 2 access points failing to authenticate is oddly loud in a quiet room, plastic and silicon refusing movement. I remember the small, precise sounds. The soft click as a badge was placed on a collection tray, the rustle of a laptop being slid into a protective sleeve, the discreet beep of a printer printing out the sign notices. Someone murmured, then no one did. Dad's face looked smaller than in memory. Lucas's jaw worked like a person learning new words. Their badges deactivated, their email access was flagged for collection. The escort paths I had mapped unfolded as security politely guided them out. I had arranged for a modest severance package that complied with the for cause findings, and we had HR waiting to walk them through options for non-exec staff. The intention was to avoid spectacle while making the change irreversible. That is the cruelty of process. It does not need to shout to take effect. After the deactivation, I read the clause that required corrective statements be entered into the official minutes. The words we demanded were specific because words are where reputations live and die. I handed a microphone to Dad and asked him to make the corrective statement into the record. He came to the mic slower than I expected, and his voice sounded thinner than I had heard it in years. He said, "I retract my earlier remark and apologize. Melanie is fit to lead." The sentence landed like a bell. It was short, flat, and exact. Lucas shuffled, then took the mic with an awkwardness that made the room hold its breath. He read, "Men are not better leaders. My sister's results speak for themselves," as if reading from a script he did not want to deliver. Both statements were flat in tone, but they were on the record, signed, and witnessed. Dana handed each a signature page acknowledging the retraction and a consent to distribute the recording as part of the minutes. We sent a copy of the recorded corrective statements to the bank, to major vendors, and to the press contact who sat near the side wall with a small video light. The press clicked and typed and uploaded in a flurry. The clip would be online within the hour. I felt no triumph in hearing the cameras. I felt the completion of a loop. The humiliation I had suffered had been public and small and sharp. Now the remedy was equally public and legally binding. I watched Dad's shoulders narrow as if something heavier had settled onto them, and Luca's face go white as the room returned to the business of signatures and filings. I appointed Ava Bennett as interim chief executive officer effective immediately, and watched a small, involuntary cheer start in the back from technicians who had seen Ava in action on cutover weekends. Her steadiness was the right public gesture and the right practical move. She knew the operations like the back of her hand. I announced retention bonuses for field staff, guaranteed on-site tech concierge windows in the service contracts, and specific measures to preserve jobs. Non-exec staff would be offered transfers or clear exit packages, and key technicians would receive both cash and equity options. Leela took a breath and then outlined the NOC consolidation plan. An incremental intake of devices, a blackout schedule to avoid double alerts, and a hybrid monitoring overlay that kept clients' sites watched while we migrated their endpoints. Vendors received immediate notices of updated payment schedules and a one-time stabilization fund to cover transition arrears. Sam Porter confirmed the underwriter's laboratory's letter and handed a dated notice of effective exclusivity to bring home the change in monitoring relationships. Jordan acknowledged the bank's receipt of the vote and agreed to a stabilization timetable with weekly reporting. We made a public customer FAQ in less than 12 hours. Service continuity, direct contact numbers, and the guarantee of on-site windows. I recorded a 90-second video for our clients that afternoon, no drama, no family lore, simply this. You will see the tech you trust, now with better response. We had prepared for the worst and acted to make the transition look like the best option available. Ava's first public act as interim chief executive officer was to thank the technicians and to describe the immediate priorities. Steady schedules, repair of any overlooked issues, and contact with major builders to reassure them that showrooms and model homes would remain live for sales. Builders called. 3 said, "We just want the trucks on time." We promised and met the first commitments. Leela's team executed midnight cutovers and prepositioned parts like a military logistics unit. We pushed an update to the tech concierge plan that added an on-site visit tier and promised appointment windows that were real, not aspirational. The phones we expected to ring did, and the answer was a person who could fix things then and there. The press did what press does. They split the headline. Some called it a brutal takeover, others called it the arrival of a turnaround architect. I did not care for labels, I cared for the work in front of us. Stabilize the network, honor the technicians, reconcile builder accounts, and make the numbers painless again. I closed the meeting with the line I had practiced for months and that now felt earned. Respect will no longer be requested. It is now operational. It landed in the room like a settling plank. People took their seats differently afterward, as if the gravity had shifted and they were reorienting to a new north. As the boardroom emptied and the press packed, I walked the floor. I touched the plastic of a badge as it sat in a collection tray and imagined the same badge months earlier in my hand at the summit where my name had been dismissed. The difference was not in the weight of the plastic but in the architecture around it. The system now bore different rules, different incentives, and in that architecture I had placed my measure of justice. The technical work began immediately. The emotional repair would be longer, but it would be private and contained. For now, the public loop had closed. The stage that had once been a wound had become the place where the wound was acknowledged and sutured by process. The bank imposed weekly reporting. I do not love paperwork, but I love clear systems, so we automated the dashboards the bank wanted. Each Monday, the numbers pushed to Jordan Wells and his team in a format that made reading them fast and hard to contest. Uptime by the minute, incidents by category, churn rates by builder cohort, cash balances, and a reconciliation of receivables. The automation took the personal out of the pressure. The board formalized committees, audit, risk, and operations, because good governance is a face you can show to nervous partners. Ava chairs operations and does it with a voice that gets people moving. I chair the board because someone has to keep the strategic horizon in view. We also built a targeted plan for non-compete enforcement that avoided sweeping threats and focused only on staff in a position to harm systems. Human resources hotline volume spiked, and we staffed it with real people who could answer questions with clarity, not scripts. The legal landmine that can follow big corporate moves is a kind of weather. You prepare shelters and you keep people safe. Public relations split the headlines the way a river splits rocks. Some outlets called it a brutal takeover, some called it the arrival of a turnaround architect. I let the labels exist and focused on the work. We produced a short, clear customer page that addressed the questions people would have. will service continue, how to reach support, what changes to expect, and how to schedule on-site windows. I recorded a 90-second video for customers, plain camera, direct voice. You will see the tech you trust, now with better response. I did not make promises I could not keep. Vendors threatened to pull terms. Jordan's weekly reporting calmed them. Some builders called and said they were worried about PR. I told them what they wanted to hear in concrete terms: we will keep your showrooms live. We'll be on time. 3 builders said, we just want the trucks on time, and that became our operating mantra. We answered social media not with statements but with work. The volume of chatter rose and then fell as technicians showed up and problems got fixed. We did not engage in argument, we engaged in service. Press clips shared our recording and our customer video within an hour, and that made the narrative less about family drama and more about continuity of service. We also sent a brief to major vendors explaining updated payment schedules and a one-time stabilization fund to cover transition arrears. Sam Porter at Underwriters Laboratories confirmed our transfer letter, and his note put a practical cap on rumor. The first 48 hours after the announcement were the most dangerous. By the end of week 1, the story was about scheduled on-site windows and updated SLAs instead of about who said what at a holiday dinner. Operational integration moved from planned to midnight sprints. Leela led the nights. She looked different at 2 in the morning, alive, precise, and in control. We ran a series of midnight cutovers where her team absorbed monitoring endpoints from the older system into our network operations center. The scripts we had rehearsed were read like psalms: pre-check, cut, verify, escalate, confirm. We staged cellular failover kits at key sites so that if a regional fiber event occurred during migration, the site would not go dark. Fleet route optimization happened overnight. Drivers opened tablets at 6 a.m. and saw new routes that reduced drive time and shifted workloads so nobody had to work extra hours the next day. Inventory unification was a grunt task that smelled of toner and cardboard. We standardized barcodes, set min-max levels, and created kits for the top 5 job types so trucks would carry exactly what was needed for the most common calls. Tech concierge plans were reissued with real appointment windows and a staffing model that matched, and in the first week we hit a 92% on-time rate for those windows. A legacy outage flared from neglected gear on a client's site. We sent the team, swapped a gateway on the spot, and upgraded the client's system at no cost to show we were serious about continuity. That one fix turned a critic into a reference in less than 24 hours. The stabilization goal we gave ourselves was simple: 30 days to boring. Boring means predictable, reliable, and quiet. It meant the phone stopped screaming and the technicians' nights returned to normal. We set a public target and worked like routers balancing packets: tiny adjustments, constant monitoring, small corrections that add up. The bank noticed the change and commented in a note, "Good operations are culture, you have it." That sentence felt like an earned compliment. Family fallout did not respect schedules. Mom texted, "You went too far," and I replied, "I followed the documents." It was a short answer and it did not soothe her. A cousin posted a vague social media status about betrayal and invited comments. I blocked and archived and moved on like a surgeon closing an unhelpful wound. Dad left a voicemail that is still layered and confusing, roughly half pride, half reproach, and I listened once in the car and then archived it. He called twice more and I did not pick up. Lucas began circulating emails to old coworkers with a mix of facts and venom. Human resources intercepted them and offered exit interviews and career counseling. The messages my family and I exchanged were not the same conversations, they were parallel tracks that rarely intersected. I set a hard rule: no family negotiations during business hours. The company needed crisp decision-making and clean processes, not extra emotional bandwidth. I reserved Sundays for personal communications and I tried to respond with care then. Even that felt sterile sometimes, like visiting a museum of feelings rather than living them. Friends sent messages that wanted to cushion me. I appreciated the intent, but I needed distance. The cost of control is counted in dinners you do not have and in the soft rituals you skip. I tally those things privately and without illusions. I did what I had to do to change the system that told me my work did not matter. The personal cost is real and I do not pretend otherwise. The bank's testing was clinical. Jordan asked for simulated incident responses and we ran drills in a conference room with real-time escalation. I watched as Leela's team hit each time box like muscle memory. She called out steps and the team executed. The regulator called for proofs of data handling and we produced redacted export logs and client consent forms. They asked about encryption keys and retention policies and left satisfied. A major distributor sent a small audit team. We toured the warehouse, showed barcodes and kit lists, and they relaxed enough to increase a line by a small margin. These audits felt like a public report card, and for once, the grade looked good. Still, compliance creates its own work. Everything had to be documented, every response had to be repeatable. We spent a week building a compliance playbook that was readable to a judge and boring to colleagues, the best kind of accolade in this business. The outcome mattered. Vendors adjusted terms, banks made notes, regulators smiled the polite way regulators smile when you pass. The work was tedious and exacting, but it made us unassailable where it counted. In this part of the fight, boring was our victory. Then came the sabotage attempt, and it had the intimate cruelty of someone who knows the backdoors. Alerts started as a whisper. Administrative passwords changed at odd hours, alerts muted on a handful of legacy gateways, and a pattern of access that suggested someone using credentials they shouldn't have. Leela pulled logs and found a recurrent IP address tied to an ex-employee who still had credential remnants. The traces pointed to someone close to neighborhood, an old loyalist who had access paths we assumed were closed. We isolated the affected segment immediately, took the devices offline, and restored from verified clean backups. We rotated credentials system-wide and forced a full reset with multi-factor authentication rolled out overnight. The NOC moved into a defensive posture, more eyes on screens, more layers of approval for changes. Dana prepared a criminal referral packet while Ava argued for a measured approach. Offer an amnesty window, give the person a chance to come clean and hand over any tools they had. I thought about precedent and about the message compassion sends when it undermines security. I chose to file charges. We did offer a narrow amnesty window alongside the referral, a practical compromise. If the individual self-reported and assisted in remediation, we would weigh that cooperation in any civil recovery and in internal HR outcomes. The criminal referral made it clear we took network integrity seriously. The amnesty offered a path for those acting out of loyalty rather than malice to make better choices. The bank noted our response in the weekly meeting and wrote back, response time and containment exemplary. The act closed a door. Some doors cannot be left open lest they be used again. Filing the packet was necessary, painful, and the right professional move. A regional fiber cut then threatened our last crisis window. An upstream provider had an outage that threatened NOC visibility across dozens of sites, and a rolling uptime dip could fall below the bank's 99.9% covenant for the week. The bank's weekly report was due in 6 hours. The options felt stark: delay and hope the bank forgives a late report, or publish the hit with a mitigation plan that shows control. We chose transparency with action. I pulled Leela, Ava, and Jordan into a call and we mapped response points. Leela ordered cellular failover kits pre-staged at the warehouse and authorized overnight dispatch. Ava coordinated tech teams for manual interventions at critical sites. Jordan prepared the narrative for the bank that would accompany the numbers: honest, immediate, and documented. We loaded vans with failover hardware at 2 a.m. Techs drove to key nodes, swapped in kits, and brought visibility back to the NOC. Our automated reporting fed the bank the real-time mitigation logs along with the outage report. We paid more for expedited transport and overtime, but the consequence of inaction was greater. At dawn, the dashboards showed a hit and then a rebound. The uptime number dipped briefly, but the mitigation logs demonstrated containment and restoration within the expected windows. Jordan called within the hour. "You chose transparency and executed. That matters." The bank's response was not romance, it was operational respect. The crisis could have exposed us to terrible scrutiny. Instead, it became proof of the culture we had built to manage fits and starts without collapse. The personal toll of these choices tightened as the wins piled up. Mom called in one of those thin, urgent moments and pleaded, "Find a way to make your father whole." I listened to the edges of it, the wish for a softer ending, the longing for peace, and I felt my chest tight. Dad sent an email offering a bargain. He would go quietly if I restored his title as founder emeritus and provided a stipend that looked like honor. I read the words twice and felt the old gravity pulling. I answered with professional distance. I declined the stipend because paying for silence felt like buying permission to forget the past. I offered instead a ceremonial plaque and an agreement that would allow Dad to be founder emeritus with strictly symbolic access, museum-style visitation rights, no systems access, no operational influence. It felt like the smallest kindness that did not compromise the company. I also made clear the operational boundary: no private reconciliation that requires changing governance or reversing what the board had done. Filing the sabotage charges formally closed the window to private détente. It meant I could not offer Dad a quiet reversal without appearing to trade justice for family peace. The choice sealed itself. Jordan's note that day read, "Good operations are culture, you have it," and it landed like a benediction I did not expect to need. The bank saw resilience and the team saw that we would not compromise systems for sentiment. I felt the last small thread snap, a relief and a grief at once. That night I walked through the NOC and found Leela at her station, tired and steady. Ava came up behind me and laid a hand on my shoulder. "We didn't speak at first. We held it," she said finally. I nodded and told her what I already knew: we would keep holding it at whatever cost. The company's spine came before any single person's comfort. I had chosen that spine over family approval forever, and I would live with the price. We hit churn numbers under 3% and uptime sits at 99.97% most months. The tech concierge plans hum along with guaranteed appointment windows. When we say an on-site visit is tomorrow between 9 and noon, we mean tomorrow between 9 and noon. Retention bonuses landed as promised, and a tech who'd been with us through the first crack in the plan bought a house and sent me a photo of keys in his palm with a caption that said more than any press release ever could. Vendors come to repacks that feel like handshakes rather than tests of our pulse. The warehouse smells of cardboard and toner and an easy confidence. The parts are where they should be and the barcode scans sing like clear notes. We keep committees and weekly reporting because order is a hedge against chaos. The bank still reads our dashboards, but now they nod the way someone who watches a reliable instrument nods. The auditors left with check marks and polite smiles. The person who used to defer to Dad in meetings now checks an email from me and moves on without a flourish. Respect is not begged for. It comes in the form of on-time trucks and accurate invoices. I did what I set out to do, which is not the same as saying the cost was small. The phone calls I don't take, the dinners I miss, the family conversations I shelved are part of the ledger. But the ledger has entries on both sides now: continuity, jobs preserved, technicians feeling secure, and a measure of dignity for older clients who use our sensors as a tool to stay independent. I return to a showroom like the one where it began because places remember the rhythm of your steps. Glass and white light and a mic waiting for the right voice. This time the voice is mine without apology. A child tugs a parent's sleeve to show how the lights answer her voice. Her delight is the small testament I like best. I pass a wall that has a founder plaque and a timeline. The timeline includes the company's milestones and finally operations wins under my name in clear type, not hidden beneath anyone else's shadow anymore. I rest my hand on the lectern and check the clock. The meeting starts exactly on time because if you want people to trust you, you respect their hours. I will say this when I tell the story in public. I didn't ask them to see me, I required the system to. The sentence is not about vengeance, it is about architecture. I changed the rules so the company could respect the people who do the work. The cost was personal and full, but the change is lasting. If you've ever been sidelined by your own people, tell me your story in the comments. I read them all. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more true revenge arcs. Keep listening, the next story might be the plan you need.